The outpost was always loud. Machines roared, traders shouted prices, guards barked orders. Yet, in one corner of the dusty market, there was a strange silence. A young alien girl sat on the cold floor, her hands tied in front of her, her eyes heavy with pain. Everyone who passed by whispered about her. She lied, one said. She deserved punishment, another muttered. Her punishment was clear, her tongue had been cut out. No words could leave her mouth anymore. For most people, this was the end of her voice, the end of her truth. But one man noticed something others ignored. Daniel, a tired human mechanic, walked past the market each day on his way to the repair bay. His clothes were always stained with oil, his hands rough from work. He was not rich or important, just another worker in the colony. But Daniel had sharp eyes, and he had a habit of noticing the small things others missed. That day, as he passed the silent girl, he saw her scratching something on the ground with a broken piece of metal. At first it looked like nonsense, lines and circles on the dusty floor. But when he looked closer, he realized it was a symbol, a warning sign. The girl's eyes lifted, locking onto his. They were filled with desperation, a silent plea for someone to understand. Daniel frowned. "What are you trying to tell me?" he whispered under his breath. Before he could study the marks further, a guard stomped over and kicked the dirt, erasing everything she had drawn. The girl flinched, but she did not fight. She only lowered her head as if used to being silenced. "Don't waste your time on her," the guard sneered at Daniel. "She's a liar. Lost her tongue for it. If you value your job, stay away." Daniel nodded quickly and moved on, but his mind was restless. Something about her eyes stayed with him all day. In the repair bay, while fixing a broken generator, he kept seeing those symbols in his mind. He had worked on ships long enough to recognize danger signs. What she had drawn looked like an alert, almost like a warning of an explosion. That night, after finishing work, Daniel returned to the market. The girl was still there, shivering under the cold lights. The traders had gone, the guards were fewer, and silence wrapped the empty streets. Daniel crouched near her. "I don't know if you can hear me," he whispered, "but I saw your sign. Are you trying to warn us about something?" The girl's hands trembled as she pulled another piece of scrap metal from the ground. She scratched quickly, drawing a series of dots and arrows. Daniel tilted his head. It looked like coordinates. "Coordinates?" he muttered. "To what?" Suddenly, heavy boots echoed nearby. The girl dropped the metal and lowered her hands. A guard passed, giving Daniel a suspicious look. Daniel forced a smile and stood up, pretending to check his toolkit. When the guard left, he knelt back down. "You're risking your life to show me this," Daniel said softly. "If they catch you again—" He stopped. He could not bring himself to finish the sentence. The girl's eyes glistened in the dim light. She wanted him to believe her, to understand. Daniel sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "If you really are telling the truth, then why did they cut your tongue?" The question hung heavy in the air. The girl could not answer with words, but her stare said everything. She had been silenced, not because she lied, but because she had spoken something no one wanted to hear. The next morning, Daniel went to the repair bay as usual, but his mind was troubled. As he worked on an old transport vehicle, he noticed strange scorch marks near the fuel tank, signs of tampering. He checked the logs and realized the vehicle had been repaired only last week, yet already it showed signs of sabotage. His heart raced. The girl's warning, was it about this? Later that evening, he returned to the market again. She was waiting, though weak and pale. As soon as she saw him, her hands moved quickly, scratching new symbols. This time she drew a circle with jagged lines inside, explosion. Then she drew an arrow pointing toward the industrial section of the colony. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. She was warning about a blast, but how could he prove it? How could he convince anyone to listen when she had already been branded a liar? He looked at her, then at the darkness stretching over the colony. Something deep inside him stirred. He had always kept his head down, never caused trouble, never stood against the system. But now he could not ignore her silent cry. As he left the market that night, Daniel made a choice. For the first time in his life, he would not walk away. He would follow her signs. He would discover the truth. And perhaps, he thought, the silent girl was the only voice this colony truly needed. The next morning, the colony felt normal to most people. Merchants shouted over prices. Children chased each other through the dusty streets, and guards patrolled lazily with their rifles slung over their shoulders. Life carried on as if nothing was wrong, but for Daniel everything had changed. The girl's scratched warning would not leave his mind. He had seen sabotage in the workshop with his own eyes, scorch marks where none should be, tools left in the wrong places, fuel lines tampered with. She had not lied. She had been silenced because her truth was dangerous. Daniel finished repairing a small cargo hauler early that day. Instead of heading straight back to his small quarters, he wandered toward the industrial section of the colony. The area was filled with machines, storage tanks, and generators that powered the entire settlement. If an explosion happened here, hundreds would die. As he walked, he remembered the girl's drawing, a jagged circle with an arrow pointing here. His stomach tightened. Near one of the fuel silos, Daniel pretended to check his toolkit while his eyes searched the ground. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Workers were busy welding, carrying crates, and shouting orders. But then he spotted something strange, tiny burn marks on the pipes near the base of the silo. They looked fresh. Daniel's chest tightened. She was right. Someone was preparing something terrible. He leaned closer, running his hand over the metal. Just then, a sharp voice cut through the air. "What are you doing there?" Daniel froze. A tall alien overseer, armored and holding a data slate, stood watching him with narrow eyes. I'm just checking the pipes," Daniel replied quickly, forcing a smile. "Routine work," the overseer snorted. "Stay in your bay, mechanic." "This is not your concern," Daniel nodded, backing away, but his heart pounded. The girl's warnings were real, and now he knew the overseers were hiding it. That evening, Daniel returned to the market. The girl was still there, weak and silent, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. She immediately reached for a piece of broken wood and began scratching symbols into the dirt. She drew a series of dots connected with arrows, paths leading to the industrial section. Then she added another mark, a small triangle. Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" he whispered. She tapped her chest twice and then pointed at the triangle. Slowly, Daniel understood. The triangle was not just a shape. It was a symbol for someone, maybe a group, maybe a person in charge. Whoever it was, they were the ones behind the sabotage. Daniel leaned closer. "You're telling me someone powerful is planning this, aren't you? That's why they cut your tongue, so you couldn't expose them." The girl's eyes watered and she nodded faintly. Her silent confirmation sent a shiver down his spine. For a long moment, Daniel sat in silence. The colony trusted the overseers. Humans like him were just workers, seen as replaceable, unimportant. If he went to them with this warning, they would laugh at him or worse, punish him. He looked at the girl. She had already paid the price of truth. Would he risk the same? Before he could decide, a group of traitors passed by, laughing cruelly at the girl. One kicked dust into her face, mocking her silence. Daniel clenched his fists but forced himself to stay calm. If he drew attention now, he would be thrown out too. When the traitors were gone, Daniel knelt beside her again. "Listen," he whispered, "if you want me to help, you need to keep showing me where. Keep scratching, keep warning me. I'll figure this out." The girl's hands shook, but she scratched one final symbol, a simple clock with its hands pointing to midnight. Then she tapped the dirt twice and looked at him with fear in her eyes. Daniel's breath caught. Midnight. Whatever they were planning would happen tonight. His mind raced as he stood. He had only a few hours to act. If he failed, the colony would burn. Walking back through the market, Daniel felt the weight of the choice pressing down on him. He could ignore it and save himself, or he could trust a silent stranger and risk everything. But deep down, he already knew the answer. Tonight, he would go where her symbols led. Tonight he would uncover the truth, and tonight the colony would either be saved or destroyed. Night fell over the colony. The streets grew quiet as workers returned to their quarters and the traders shut down their stalls. Lights flickered above the dusty roads, throwing long shadows across the walls. Midnight was approaching. Daniel paced inside his small workshop, hands trembling with nervous energy. The girl's final symbol haunted him, the clock pointing to midnight. Something terrible was planned, and he was the only one who knew. But what could one mechanic do? If he went to the overseers, they would laugh in his face. They might even accuse him of being part of the lie. And if he stayed silent, the colony could be destroyed. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the pile of tools on his workbench. Wrenches, cutters, welding torches, spare wires. Nothing that could fight soldiers or stop an explosion. He was no hero. He was just a man who fixed broken machines. But wasn't that the point? He thought about the silent girl sitting alone, punished for trying to save them. She had no weapon, no power, no voice. Yet she had risked everything to warn him. Daniel's jaw tightened. If she had the courage to keep fighting without a tongue, then he had no excuse. He grabbed his toolkit and slipped into the night. The industrial section was quiet when he arrived. Massive fuel tanks stood like sleeping giants, their metal shells glowing under the pale lights. Pipes and wires stretched across the ground like veins, feeding energy into the colony. If these tanks went up in flames, nothing would survive. Daniel crouched near the base of one silo, his heart pounding. He scanned the pipes carefully, and his worst fear came true. A small device was hidden between two fuel lines, a crude bomb armed and ready. He swallowed hard. The girl had been right all along. With shaking hands, Daniel pulled out his tools. He had repaired thousands of machines in his life, but never disarmed a bomb. Still, the wiring looked familiar. It was made from stolen workshop parts. Whoever planted it wasn't a professional. They had only basic knowledge. "I can do this," Daniel whispered to himself. He carefully loosened the screws, pulling back the cover. Wires glowed faintly inside, powered by a small energy cell. He knew one wrong cut could set it off. Sweat ran down his neck as he worked. Then he heard footsteps. Daniel froze, his breath caught in his chest. Two alien guards were patrolling nearby, their voices low but sharp. He ducked behind the silo, gripping his wrench tightly. "The mechanic," one guard said. "He's been asking too many questions." "The overseer is watching him," the other replied. "If he interferes tonight, he'll be silenced, just like the girl." Daniel's blood went cold. So they knew. The girl hadn't lied. She had been punished for telling the truth, and now he was next. The guards moved away, their voices fading. Daniel exhaled slowly and returned to the bomb. He worked quickly, cutting the final wire with trembling fingers. The small device flickered, then powered down. Relief washed over him, but it lasted only a moment, because when he stepped back, he saw 3 more bombs, all hidden across the pipes. All ready to ignite. His stomach dropped. He couldn't disarm them all before midnight. For a moment, despair threatened to crush him. He thought about running, about saving himself. But then he remembered the girl's eyes, wide with fear yet filled with hope, when she scratched those symbols. She had trusted him. Daniel clenched his fists. "No," he whispered. "I won't walk away." He realized he didn't need to disarm every bomb. He just needed to stop the main trigger. The bombs were connected. He could see wires leading to a central point under the generator hub. If he destroyed the trigger, the whole chain would fail. He grabbed his toolkit and sprinted across the industrial yard, crouching low to avoid patrols. His heart raced, each second dragging him closer to midnight. At last, he reached the hub. A small box was hidden beneath the metal floor, glowing faintly. The central trigger. He pulled out his cutter, sparks flying as he ripped open the casing. Inside, the timer blinked. 009. 008. 007. Panic surged through him. He had seconds left. With shaking hands, he yanked the power cell free. The timer froze at 0003, silence. Daniel collapsed against the wall, chest heaving. He had stopped it. The colony was safe, at least for now. But as he caught his breath, he heard a voice from the shadows. Cold, sharp, filled with anger. "Well, well," the overseer said, stepping into the light. "I see the mechanic has found his courage." Daniel's blood ran cold. He was no longer just a curious worker. He was a threat. And now the real danger was standing right in front of him. The overseer's shadow stretched long across the ground as he stepped closer. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, cold and calculating. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. He still clutched the power cell he had ripped from the bomb, but it was no weapon. "Well," the overseer sneered, his voice low and sharp. So the silent girl found herself a fool to do her work. Daniel froze. "They knew about her." "You planted the bombs," Daniel said quietly. "You wanted the colony to burn." The overseer chuckled darkly. "Burn? No, explosions are only tools. Chaos creates profit. Fear makes slaves. You humans will work harder when you think survival depends on us." The words cut deep. Daniel suddenly understood. The girl had spoken the truth all along. She had uncovered the overseer's plan to control the colony with fear. And for that, they had silenced her. The overseer leaned closer, his face inches away. "You should have ignored her. Now you've made yourself a problem." Before Daniel could react, the overseer struck him hard across the face. He stumbled back, dropping his toolkit. Pain flared, but he forced himself to stay standing. He had no choice but to run. Daniel sprinted into the shadows, weaving between fuel tanks and pipes. Shouts rang out behind him as guards joined the chase. Lights flared, alarms blared, and heavy boots pounded the ground. He ran until his lungs burned, then slipped into a maintenance tunnel. Darkness swallowed him, and the sounds of pursuit slowly faded. Only the hum of pipes and the drip of leaking water filled the air. Daniel pressed his back against the wall, panting. His mind raced. He could not fight them alone. He needed help. And there was only one person who had tried to warn him from the beginning. The silent girl. He returned to the market at dawn. She was still there, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. When she saw him, her head lifted, a flicker of hope returning. Daniel knelt beside her. You were right. The overseers planted the bombs. They want fear and control. You knew, and they cut your tongue to hide the truth. Her eyes glistened, and she nodded faintly. Daniel pulled a piece of chalk from his pocket, something he had taken from his workshop, and placed it in her hand. Show me, he said. Show me everything you know. With trembling fingers, the girl began to draw on the stone floor. She drew tunnels, storage rooms, secret pathways. Then she drew crates marked with alien symbols. Daniel studied the drawings, his stomach tightening. Weapons, he whispered. They've been smuggling weapons right under our noses. She nodded again, her hand shaking as she drew one final mark. A triangle, the same symbol she had shown before. She tapped it twice, then pointed toward the overseer's quarters. Daniel understood. The conspiracy was not small. It was controlled from the top. The overseers themselves were orchestrating everything, his hands curled into fists. He had fixed ships, repaired machines, and saved lives with his tools, but this was bigger. The colony was in danger of becoming nothing more than a cage for humans. He looked at her again. If we expose them, if we find proof, the others will believe us. We can stop them. For the first time since he had met her, the girl's lips curved into the faintest smile. She could not speak, but her eyes said everything. She believed in him. That night, Daniel followed her drawings through the tunnels beneath the colony. The air was thick with dust and the smell of oil. Strange echoes carried through the passageways, but they pressed on in silence. At last, they reached a storage chamber. The walls were stacked with crates sealed tight. Daniel pried one open with his wrench and his stomach dropped. Inside were rifles, explosives, and armor, all meant for war. They were planning to arm themselves, Daniel whispered, and use the humans as pawns. The girl tapped her hand against the crates, then pointed upward toward the overseer's towers. The meaning was clear. This was only the beginning. The weapons were not just for control of the colony. They were part of something much larger. Before Daniel could process it, footsteps echoed from the tunnel entrance. He and the girl ducked behind the crates as two alien guards entered, speaking in hushed tones. Shipment leaves tomorrow night, one said. The humans won't even know until it's too late, the other replied. Daniel's blood boiled. The conspiracy was bigger than he had feared. The overseers were preparing to sell humans like merchandise, and the girl had been the only one brave enough to expose it. As the guards left, Daniel clenched his jaw. He had seen enough. Now he had proof. He turned to the girl, whispering fiercely, "We'll stop them, together." Her eyes shone with determination. For the first time, she wasn't just a victim. She was an ally. And Daniel knew one thing for certain. The fight for truth had only just begun. The hidden chamber was colder than the tunnels outside. The crates of weapons loomed like silent monsters, their sharp edges catching the weak light of Daniel's lantern. The girl crouched beside him, her small frame trembling, not from fear but from exhaustion. She had carried this truth alone for so long. Now at last she had someone who believed her. Daniel touched one of the rifles inside the crate. The metal was sleek, alien-made, far beyond what humans in the colony were allowed to use. His chest tightened. These weapons weren't meant for defense. They were meant for control, he whispered. If we can show this to the others, they'll see the overseers for what they are. The girl shook her head quickly and drew another symbol in the dirt with her finger, a sharp arrow pointing down. Daniel frowned. A trap? She nodded. The realization struck him. The overseers hadn't hidden these weapons very deeply. It was almost as if they wanted someone to find them. If he tried to expose this alone, they could twist the story, call him a thief, and blame the humans. Suddenly, footsteps echoed again. This time heavier, louder. Not just 2 guards, many. Daniel's heart raced. He grabbed the girl's hand. "We need to move." They slipped into a narrow side tunnel just as voices filled the chamber. From the shadows, Daniel peered back. A group of alien guards entered, scanning the room. Behind them walked the overseer who had caught him the night before. His eyes burned with cruel satisfaction. "Find the mechanic," the overseer ordered. "He has seen too much." Daniel's stomach dropped. It was official now. He wasn't just a curious worker. He was a target. The chase began before he could breathe. Daniel and the girl ran through the twisting tunnels, their footsteps echoing wildly. Behind them, boots thundered, shouts rang, and lights flickered as the hunters closed in. The tunnels grew tighter, forcing Daniel to duck under low pipes and leap over broken beams. His breath came hard, sweat pouring down his face. The girl kept pace, silent but determined, her grip on his hand steady. At one turn, Daniel stopped and pulled a wrench from his belt. With one quick strike, he smashed a power conduit. Sparks flew, plunging the tunnel into darkness. The hunters cursed behind them, slowed by the sudden blackout. But Daniel knew it was only a matter of time. They would not stop until they caught him. "They'll brand me a traitor," he muttered half to himself. "They'll say I worked with you to sabotage the colony." The girl looked at him, her eyes fierce. She pointed at his chest, then tapped her own, then raised her finger upward. The meaning was clear. "You and I, together. Truth above lies." Daniel managed a weak smile. Even without words, she gave him strength. They reached an old maintenance shaft. Daniel forced the rusty hatch open, and they climbed out into the night air. The colony above was still awake in parts. Workers loading cargo, guards strolling lazily. None of them knew what hunted in the shadows below. But Daniel knew the overseer's lies would spread faster than he ever could. If they were caught, he would be executed and the girl would be dragged back into silence. He turned to her. "We need proof. Something so strong they can't twist it. We can't just keep running." The girl nodded, then pulled a shard of metal from her sleeve. She scratched quickly on the ground. "Main hub." Then she drew a box with lines shooting out. Daniel stared. "The central system?" he whispered. "They keep records there." She nodded again. Daniel's pulse quickened. If they could reach the hub, maybe they could find the overseer's plans, documents, orders, shipments. Hard evidence. It was dangerous, but it was their only chance before they could move. A spotlight cut across the street. "There!" a guard shouted. Daniel cursed under his breath. He grabbed the girl's hand and darted into a narrow alley. Shots rang out, scorching the walls around them. Dust and sparks filled the air. They ran through twisting streets, the sound of pursuit never far behind. Daniel's legs burned, his lungs screamed, but he pushed forward. The girl stayed close, her silent determination stronger than any voice. At last, they stumbled into a storage yard. Stacks of containers formed a maze around them. Daniel ducked behind one, pulling the girl close. His heart hammered as footsteps approached. "This way," a voice barked. Daniel closed his eyes, holding his breath. The hunters were all around now. He was no longer chasing the truth, he was the prey. And yet, even as fear pressed down, something inside him hardened. He wasn't just running for himself anymore. He was running for her, for every human who didn't know they were about to be enslaved. The hunter had become the hunted. But Daniel swore silently. Before this ended, he would turn the tables. The storage yard was still as stone, but Daniel's pulse was wild thunder in his chest. He and the girl crouched behind the containers, breath shallow, waiting for the sound of heavy boots to fade. The overseer's guards were everywhere now, sweeping the colony like hounds. "They won't stop," Daniel whispered, his voice tight. "Not until we're gone. Or silenced." The girl's large eyes glowed faintly in the dark. She didn't speak, she couldn't. But the way she looked at him told Daniel she wasn't ready to give up. Neither was he. Slowly, carefully, they slipped out of the yard and moved through narrow alleys. The colony above them hummed with quiet menace. Lights in towers, shadows on roofs, whispers of fear in the air. The overseers had spread word already. Daniel was the liar now. Daniel was the traitor, and yet he carried the truth in his heart. Hours later, they reached his workshop. Daniel locked the door behind them and pulled down the shades. The familiar smell of oil and steel filled the room. Here he felt in control again, surrounded by tools and machines. The girl sat on a bench watching as Daniel rummaged through drawers and shelves. His mind raced with ideas. If the overseers had cut her tongue to silence her, then maybe he could give her another way to speak. "You risked everything to warn me," Daniel said softly as he laid tools across the table. "It's time they hear your voice again." He worked quickly, welding small scraps of metal into shape, wiring parts from old radios and a broken console. Sparks flew as his hands moved, steady and precise despite his exhaustion. The girl tilted her head, curious, but her eyes never left him. Hours passed. Finally, Daniel held up a small device, an old speaker connected to a simple typing pad. The screen glowed faintly, ready for input. He carried it to her, setting it gently in her lap. "Try it," he whispered. The girl's hands shook as she touched the pad. Slowly, painfully, she typed her first words. HANKYOU. The speaker buzzed, and a faint but clear voice filled the room. Daniel froze. For the first time he heard her. Not just her eyes, not just her scratches on stone, but her voice. His throat tightened. The girl looked at him, tears slipping down her face. She typed again, MYNAMEISARIA. The device spoke her name. Daniel exhaled shakily. "Arya," he repeated, his voice breaking. "So that's who you are," she nodded, trembling with emotion. For the first time since her punishment, she had spoken her truth. That night, with Arya's new voice, they began to plan. Daniel spread maps across the table. "The overseers are moving weapons. If we can access the central hub, maybe we can find evidence, orders, logs, something they can't deny." Arya typed quickly. "PROOFWILLSAVEUS. Her words echoed in the small workshop. Daniel nodded firmly. Yes, proof will save us. But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. Would the colony believe them? Or would the overseers crush the truth under lies once more? Arya reached out, placing her small hand over his. Her touch was light but steady. She didn't need words to tell him she believed. Her courage gave him strength. The next morning they moved carefully through the colony. Daniel disguised himself with a hood and scarf, while Arya walked beside him, silent except for her small device hidden in her cloak. Every corner felt dangerous, every glance from a stranger like a knife. Near the hub, guards stood watch. The central building was tall, glowing with alien lights. Inside, records of the entire colony were kept. Shipments, orders, surveillance. Proof of the conspiracy waited within. They slipped into a side entrance Daniel had once used for repairs. The halls were quiet, lined with humming machines and glowing panels. Daniel guided Arya down the narrow corridors until they reached the archive room. Rows of data spheres glowed faintly on the shelves, each one filled with information. Daniel quickly began scanning them. He pulled one free and loaded it into a small reader. Lines of alien script appeared across the screen. Arya leaned closer, typing on her device. TRANSPORTSHIPS, HUMANCARGO. Daniel's blood ran cold. They were planning to sell us, he whispered. Humans as cargo? Like merchandise. His stomach twisted with rage. The proof was right here, but before he could take the sphere, an alarm blared. The door slammed shut. Red lights flashed. From the speakers above, the overseer's voice thundered. Did you really think you could hide, mechanic? Did you think a broken girl could save you? Daniel's hands tightened around the sphere. Arya clutched her device, her eyes blazing with fire. Through the alarm, her new voice rang out clear and strong. HEATRUTHWILLBEHEARD. And for the first time, Daniel believed it. The archive room glowed red as alarms wailed, painting the walls in a sickly light. Daniel held the stolen data sphere tight against his chest. Inside was the proof, records of shipments, orders, and the overseer's plan to sell humans like cargo. If the colony saw this, no lie could cover it. Beside him, Arya's small device buzzed. Her trembling fingers typed words that rang out into the air. HEYA, RECOMING. Heavy boots thundered outside. Daniel could hear shouts, the clatter of weapons, the overseer's guards closing in. They had only moments left. Then we make this count, Daniel said firmly. His voice was low but steady. If we can reach the broadcast tower, we can send this proof to everyone. They won't be able to silence us again. Arya nodded, her eyes fierce. Daniel shoved the sphere into his toolkit and pulled Arya toward a side door. Together, they slipped into a narrow service corridor. just as the main doors burst open behind them. Guards flooded the archive room too late. The corridors were a maze of steel and shadows. Daniel led the way, his heart racing, every step echoing with danger. Arya kept close, her device clutched against her chest. They could hear the guards shouting orders, splitting into groups, the hunt growing tighter. At last they reached a ladder leading up to the broadcast tower. Daniel climbed first, his muscles burning with the effort. Arya followed, silent but determined, her hands gripping the rungs with iron strength. They emerged into the control chamber at the tower's peak. Screens flickered with static, controls hummed with power. This was the heart of communication, the place where truth or lies could spread to every ear in the colony. Daniel placed the data sphere into the console. Lines of alien script lit up. He didn't understand all of it, but he didn't need to. He just needed the files to transmit. "Come on," he muttered, fingers flying across the keys. "Send, send, send," the machine buzzed. Transmission prepared. Seconds crawled by like hours. Then a cold laugh echoed behind them. The overseer stepped into the chamber flanked by guards. His eyes glowed with cruel fire. "Did you think you could outwit us, mechanic?" He sneered. "One human and a broken girl?" Daniel stepped in front of Arya, shielding her. His voice was steady. "We're not broken. And we're not afraid." The overseer raised a weapon. "Then you'll die liars, just like her." But before he could fire, Arya stepped forward. Her hands flew over her device, her new voice ringing out across the chamber, powerful and clear. "SPOKETHETRUTHYOUFEARIT." The guards hesitated, stunned by the voice of the girl they had thought silenced forever. She was no longer a whisper. She was thunder. In that moment, the console beeped. Transmission complete. Across the colony, screens lit up, voices filled with the overseer's own words, proof of their lies, their shipments, their crimes. The people could see everything now. The overseer's face twisted in rage. "No!" he roared, lunging forward. Daniel grabbed a heavy wrench from his belt and swung with all his strength. Metal cracked against armor. The overseer staggered but did not fall. The guards raised their rifles, but the chamber shook as workers from below stormed in. Humans and even some aliens who had grown tired of fear. Chaos exploded. Shots fired, fists flew, alarms blared louder than ever. In the middle of it all, Daniel and Arya fought side by side. He with his tools, she with her voice. At last, the overseer charged again, weapon raised high. Daniel braced himself, but Arya stepped forward, her voice sharp as a blade. "HECOLONYBELONG STOALLYOURLIESAREOVER." The words echoed from every speaker in the colony. The overseer froze, his power crumbling under the weight of truth. Workers surged forward, pulling him down, disarming the guards. The battle was over. Silence fell at last, broken only by the hum of the tower. The people stood in the chamber, eyes fixed on Arya. She looked small, fragile, scarred by cruelty, but her voice had carried their freedom. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice soft but filled with pride. "They cut your tongue, Arya, but they couldn't silence your truth." Her device buzzed, speaking her reply. "HETRUTHASVOICESNOW." All around them, humans and allies lifted their heads high. For the first time, fear loosened its grip. The conspiracy was broken, the overseers defeated, not by weapons alone, but by courage and truth. Daniel looked at Arya, her eyes shining with hope. Together they had turned silence into a roar. And in that moment he knew. The last stand had not only saved the colony, it had given them a future.